Good morning and welcome to the Solutions Panel. This is a platform designed for our community advocates, elected and appointed officials, for us to actively talk about additional solutions to help curb the rising violence that we've seen in the Baton Rouge community. Again, we want to thank Prophetic Voices for providing this platform for our community activists along with our elected and appointed officials. Also, a special thank you to Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church, Pastor Fred Jeff Smith, and a very special thank you to Mad Game Productions for helping to put this platform together and for the live production on our live streams on Vimeo as well as Facebook. I am your moderator this morning, Tony King, and right now we are at the commencement of our second panel of the Solutions platform. This panel consists of a collection of community activists, advocates, who are actively being part of the solution here in the Baton Rouge community. At this time, I would like to introduce those that are part of our second panel. We have Eugene Collins, president of the Baton Rouge chapter of the NAACP. Welcome. From Metromorphosis, we have Raymond Jetson. From 100 Black Men of Greater Baton Rouge, we have Michael R.D. Adams. Welcome. From the Baton Rouge Area Chamber of Commerce, we have Brace B. Godfrey III. Welcome. And from the Power Coalition, we have Kaitlyn Joshua. Welcome. As many of you were here in attendance of part one with our community, with our elected and appointed officials from both law enforcement, from the mayor's office, along with our judicial system and the Metro Council. We heard about various programs that we've that the mayor's office putting together, East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office, some of the proactive solutions that we've seen in juvenile courts. Just from your perspective, and some of the work that you all are doing, some of the tireless efforts you've put into the city, what are some of the things that you've seen that we may need to do, some of the things that you've done, and some of the things we may need seeing done to continue to help bridge the gap and find solutions for us to be able to actively make Baton Rouge a much safer city? We'll start with you.
I'll jump in because my response may be just a bit different. As I was listening to all of the things that were being presented here, that there were three thoughts that were top of mind for me. The first is the reciprocal responsibility of awareness. And so if I have something that is intended to serve the community, then I have a responsibility to do all that I possibly can to make certain that all of the folks who would participate in, could benefit from, or who could be a part of or aware of that. Likewise, if I am interested in serving some part of the community, then I have a responsibility to be aware of everything that already exists. Because sometimes we spend a lot of energy recreating things that somebody else is already trying to do. And so being aware that there needs to be a greater awareness. There's some very powerful things that were talked about in the first panel, whether it was from law enforcement, the elected perspective, the courts, and the education, as I think Councilwoman Banks brought forth in a very real way. So awareness. The second thing is the hard work of collaboration. So very often we do things and we become really, really attached to our shiny, bobbly thing. And we want to hold our shiny, bobbly thing rather than identifying as many people as possible who can put their hands on these shiny, bobbly things and make it more shiny and more bobbly for a larger audience. Collaboration is hard work. It requires real effort. It requires requires a humility. It requires an interest that's rooted in people and not myself and my brand. So the hard work. And the last thing is the due diligence of understanding what's already happening in the community with the people who are closest to the issues. Our community is not devoid of people who are working in neighborhoods, on a block, in a church. We have an obligation to do all that we can to understand who those people are, what they're doing, and how what we're doing could connect with that. And so for me, the thing that kept resonating when I was listening to this very important first panel is awareness, the hard work of collaboration, and doing the due diligence to understand who's out there really doing the work.
To that, Mr. Jetson, I'll add a couple of things. Let's zoom out a little bit and take a bigger picture look at this conversation. I think that one thing for all of us here, for everybody listening, at the baseline is a recognition that we all have a part to play. And we have all played a part in the creation of what we're dealing with right now. None of us has clean hands in this. And I remember listening to my daddy talk, as a matter of fact, at this church when I was a little old boy. And what he shared still remains true to this day, because when we look at the young people who are perpetuating the violent crime that we're talking about in our communities, they didn't create the conditions of those communities within which they live. We did that. They didn't create the conditions where they are food insecure, where they're financially insecure, where mama and daddy may or may not be around, or mommy and daddy may or may not be unemployed or underemployed. That's not their fault, that's ours. So we all have to create a shared recognition that we all have a part to play and decide what that part is going to look like. Now the second part of this, kind of zoom out big picture, we talk a lot of programs which are absolutely necessary. Programs create opportunities to build capacity within people to move themselves beyond where they are. The other side of that is the other part. I know my good friend Kaitlyn next to me also plays a part in this world, and that's the policy side of it. While programs create opportunities, policy creates conditions, right? While programs touch the people who show up, policy touches everybody. And so, Tony, you asked a couple of questions about advocacy or how to advocate on the first panel, and that's a tremendous opportunity for everybody to flex your advocacy muscle and also to make your voice heard when it comes to going to the polls and beyond. I could become a little preachy, so I'll stop right there.
Well, we are in a church. Yes.
And so you heard Reverend Jetson talk about awareness. You heard Trey talk about programs and policies. I want to talk about implementation.
Okay.
Because we have to have people that look like Trey, look like Rev, look like me, black men who implement some of these programs and policies and who are aware and awake or woke in our community. And that has not happened. And so when we talk about that, in that first panel, I complimented them
jump in here. And, you know, I'm gonna be good because we got some of my board members in the room here today. So, you know, I definitely want to leave here as president. And in addition, my good friend, a young person that leads DR for the People, she's in this crowd today. A group of young folks that's really moving on that young level of advocacy and all those good things. But I want to start at something Mr. Jetson brought up, and that's about collaboration, right? And not this forced sense of collaboration, like we're going to get y'all in rooms and this is a part of the project and y'all got to work together, right? Real collaboration. And we got to get past that because we want to talk about the violence in our communities. That's all of our mental psyche, right? And let's keep it real for a second. Some of the people in this room, we owe a good conversation from a shootout. That's the psyche of this city right now. That's where we are. We can't stay on each other's side and just stay out of each other's way. We are adverse to conflict in this town, and that ain't got nothing to do with young folk. You're going to see the same thing amongst the politicians. If you don't believe me, just look at some of the campaign rhetoric. So how can we expect for that kind of crap to be at the higher levels and not trickle ways down to our streets? And that's just the way it is. So we can't just sit here and blame these kids when the deacons can't get along, the ushers can't get along, the choir members about to fight. These kids have learned it from somewhere. They didn't pick it up just from TV. They picked it up from losers like us.
And you make a good point. Of course, attitude is always going to reflect leadership in any organization that you're in. But there was something that was said from Mr. Godfrey that I kind of want to jump into and kind of push a little bit. And Pastor Jetson, you mentioned it as well. As we talk about, you know, the three pillars that you mentioned, and Mr. Adams, you brought up something about implementation. There's one thing that I thought that I think is necessary that we haven't addressed enough. Maybe you said like some of the parents being underemployed, about it being our fault. You know, all are obligated and all are responsible for the current situation that we're in. As the head of the Baton Rouge Area Chamber of Commerce, we briefly mentioned and talked about the disinvestment in communities that is needed. We talked about food deserts. Of course, everyone now is excited that, you know, one of the local grocers is moving, you know, right at the line of North Baton Rouge, right? What can we do, and what, from your perspective, being over the chamber, what can we do, or what can you do, or what are some of the things that we can do to implement in order to be part of that solution that you talked about? We're all responsible, and since we're all responsible, we're all obligated to be part of the solution. What can you do, and what can we do, being a member of the chamber, being over the chamber?
Love it. Thank you so much for asking that question. First, quick point of clarification. I don't run the chamber. I'm the
It's not your chamber. It's not the Brace chamber. My bad. Forgive me for that. But I mean, you know, I need to clarify that. Please forgive me.
My brother Mike Adams said we in a church, we're going to speak that into existence. No. No, thank you. I live on the policy side. I run the policy shop, and I'm good right there. Thank you so much for asking the question, though. I have so much to say about that answer, right? Because in my role, I take a lot of responsibility for not just identifying where we are, but understanding and beginning to implement systemic solutions so that we can kind of begin to tackle this. Especially from an economic development lens, and I'll stay there to keep my answers a little bit more diverse. There are a few different things. Number one, so one of the pillars of our new 5-year strategic plan deals with just this. It's with investment in disinvested communities, and we've set a 5-year goal of stimulating $100 million of private investment into disinvested communities, right? We understand this. Baton Rouge ranks very low on a scale that's called economic inclusion. And what that means is the prosperity of this city is not shared by everybody within this city because there are pay gaps between white and black people. There are pay gaps between men and women. There's a substantial wealth gap across this community. So how then do we begin to instantiate a body of work within that can begin to move the needle and make the difference? That's where we are right now. So a few things, and as a matter of fact, Pastor Smith, after this, I'm going to ask for some help on some things, right? So in the very, very short term, a few things that we're working on, talking about creating solutions right now. Mr. Ponton on the first panel said we need to get trades back in schools. Well, one of the things that we're actively in partnership with East Baton Rouge Parish School System on is opening doors to industry sectors in the capital region, high wage, high growth, high demand industries, getting students on the ground, in the workplace, early work opportunities. When Mr. Raymond Jetson graduated from Capitol High School in 1974, he could have finished Capitol High School, right, as an electrician, or as a carpenter, or as an auto mechanic, because the trades were there. Now, it wasn't simply about those opportunities, but what it did for that young black boy in the 9th grade who wasn't interested in going to college is it gave him an opportunity to learn something that would have value financially for him, because he can do odd jobs because he's learning something and make some money, and then the day he graduates, he can move into a job in his neighborhood working with his hands. Now, we, the smart people, decided we're going to take those programs out of schools because everybody had to go to college, right? So that 9th grade boy who had no interest in going to college then had no light at the end of the tunnel. So why sit in a class that I can't even pronounce, that I'm not interested in, for the next 4 years? Where that same child would go to that school knowing he has an opportunity to create a better self so that he can make money. So why not go to school? Why not get 2 meals a day, see all of my friends, and build this skill set so I can make money when I finish? That's thing one, bringing those opportunities back into the school system. Thing number two, though, is expanding economic opportunities within people. I've heard it said like this before: nothing stops a bullet like a job. Now, of course, we can't hang our future on little sound bites and axioms like that, but I do think that there's a lot of wisdom there. So where, from an economic development standpoint, does that take us? Increased job opportunities for. Now, the second thing, and this one I'm asking Pastor Smith's help on, is what are we working on? Solutions, right? Is we are beginning to implement programs that move people who are unemployed or underemployed into training programs with money to mitigate barriers, and we talked about some of them, including transportation on the prior panel, into training programs and directly into jobs with funding to do so. So those are two examples, and I'll stop there because I can talk for the next way too long.
And Tony, I want to add to that. Because as we talk about like jobs and economics, right? Because you got to realize that crime is birth problems, no matter how we feel about that, right? And a few weeks ago, a friend of mine reached out to CeeLo, which is a rapper in that group, right? One of our elders now, right? And I asked him the question. I said, "What is a shooter? Like, what do a shooter looks like?" Because we're here talking about gun violence. And what he told me was, if you think about a shooter and what that role is, whether it's a group, a violent group, or a gang, a shooter is the lowest level job within that group. The shooter is somebody that's not good at hustling. The shooter is somebody that wants to earn their keep. So that shooter is the same underperforming kid in 9th grade that ain't worried about a job or trade or nothing else. That shooter is the fry cook at McDonald's that can't maintain their job, because that shooter just wants to have some value to that group, to that street, or to that game. If we're going to reach that shooter, we got to find other shooters. That's the solution. Like, so when I see guys like what Mad Marvin is trying to do in Zion City, or I see historically what Silky Slim is trying to do, those are folks that can reach those people. We got to get out of our fear of working with those people and put them back beside us and not behind them, right? When I say behind them, you go to work and I'm going to help you get the resources that you need to really prevent this problem. Because even though I'm from the bottom, I ain't never been a shooter. My grandmother let me out the yard. So as a result, we got to go find those people that can reach those folks. And something else, as we talk about trust with kids and building that trust when they look at us, right? We know for a fact that about a month ago, our sheriff announced that he had made some arrests in a RICO case that was from the Bankstown Mafia, right? There's only one problem. Nobody in that community has ever heard of the Bankstown Mafia. None of
I'm really glad that you brought that up because that's actually the next subject that I want to go into is how to attract those young people who are within this demographic that are committing these violent crimes. I want to touch on something real quick first before we do, and that is from a policy perspective because Mr. Godfrey brought that up, and just to kind of bring you in, Kaitlyn, from the Power Coalition. As he mentioned earlier, from a policy perspective, that's something that you all particularly delve into, how to affect policy, because as you mentioned, policy is more systemic. It changes the total systems that affect all of us that are creating this incubator that is creating this violent crime that we're all responsible for, just to kind of touch back on. So from a policy perspective, real quick, what can be done? What are you all doing, and how can we help in terms of creating a solution to change the systems? Just before we jump into that, attracting young people, because I really want to touch on that. How can we be a part of the policy solution in order to change the circumstances that's creating this violent crime?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I do with the Power Coalition year-round, we try to encourage, not just try, we encourage Black folks, especially folks of color, to use their voice year-round, not just during legislative session. It's too late if you're waiting to talk to your legislator by then. So we host year-round town halls, conversations online. We do a lot of lives, but we also utilize our relationships with the churches to be able to reach congregations and talk to them about how important it is to use your voice as power. And so when I was listening to the panel around, as you stated, policy and affecting change, a lot of the things that we're seeing in terms of the uptick in violence, those are just like the outcome, right? That's just the outcome of us not plugging in, not putting the right folks in office, and yeah, I said that, and making sure that the folks that represent us are actually using that relationship in the right way. And so I would just listed out some things, like we were talking about paid sick leave and equal pay for women and access to guns. Like I know a lot of people don't want to have those conversations. A lot of folks feel that it is our right as well to carry out our Second Amendment right. But when we look at the amount of access in Black and brown neighborhoods, it's all by design, it's systemic. And when you look at the bill, we had HB 37 last night, was able to mobilize a large group to have those conversations with legislators, asking them not to pass more access to guns. And of course that we mobilize year-round to make sure that folks understand in real time what is happening at the legislature. But not just there, we know that the local policies around school board changes, Metro Council, Mayor Broom's office, those doors are open. You just have to be willing to make those relationships with your elected officials, have those hard conversations, and make sure that your voice is heard.
So for those that are viewing online, those that are in the audience, how can they actually find out more information with the Power Coalition so that they can be a part of those active voices that you need in order to institute that change via policy?
Absolutely. You can visit our website, powercoalition.org, or speak to me afterwards. All of us are working 24/7, and so we have real live streams on our website to update you what's going on in the community at all times.
Thank you. And we're going to revisit that as well, but just kind of hop back on what Mr. Collins mentioned about being able to attract those young people.
So Tony,
Yeah.
can we start with the big elephant in the room on gun violence, and we need to be able to say that there are too many guns in our community. There are too many guns that our young Black males have. An 18-year-old should not have access to an automatic weapon. Period.
Well, here's the question that I would ask about that is, are these crimes, and I guess this is more something for law enforcement and those that are in the judicial system, are these crimes that are being committed, these violent crimes, these automatic weapons that you mentioned that these young people may be committing these crimes with, are they legal weapons? Because then it's not an issue of legal weapons being in the community, it's more of an issue of illegal weapons, and how do we stop and curb that from infiltrating our neighborhoods?
From a policy perspective, an 18-year-old can go purchase an automatic weapon. That's a legal weapon. But the statement I'm making is that it should not be. We should make a statement. We should enforce policy. We should implement policy that should not happen. An 18-year-old should not have access to an automatic weapon when he has to wait till he's 21 to buy a handgun. Now, so when we encounter young men like that, we can talk about the mass shootings that have happened around the country, from Texas to Florida to Las Vegas to Buffalo, New York.
just to touch on what he said, and I don't know if you want to.
No, please.
You know, having a war weapon, right? As we talk about, you know, I think about the school shooting where a young man was able to buy assault rifles in consecutive days and over 500 rounds and no questions were asked, right? That's a different thing. But with this shooter here in Baton Rouge, we got to be honest. He's not going to Walmart and buying an AR. He's not going to the gun shop.
That essentially was my point.
Yeah, he's not going to the gun shop buying an AR. He's getting it off the block somewhere. And let me just say this, because when we talk about put down the guns, right? That's typically said by middle-class black folks that don't live in those communities. I can tell you for a fact, I'm not going to go and tell a youngster to put down your gun on a street where the police is scared to walk without a gun. I'm not doing that. That's stupid. And when the first time that I tell a kid to do that, I'm gonna lose him, right? What I need to talk about is why you felt the need to use that gun in your last altercation, right? Because in the reality, I live right there on Frank Street. I ain't coming out my door without mine. So we have to address that. And we gotta realize that these liberal leftist approaches, they never worked in my communities, and most people in my community don't even think about that, because we think about black folks as a monolith, and we don't realize that these folks are very different. And until we get to the crux of that, we'll never build that trust there. And we got to get to the point when we look at diversity at the table, is not just having black folks at the table, but having folks at the table that understand the psyche of a shooter, that understand what happens on 38th Street, that understands what happened in Eden Park in the bottom. And sometimes we don't get that. We just put black faces at the table.
And Tony, I'm gonna jump in a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Because a critical point in your question was about attracting young people.
Yes.
So part of the reality is I am 66 years old, and I am flattered when anybody uses the word young in association with me. And so I'm not the face. I'm not the voice to attract young people. We have to lift up young voices in our community. We have to be willing you don't have to move out, just move over. And make room for the young voices that are emerging. A critical part of this is recognizing the intergenerational response that has to happen. It is the wisdom of the elders and the ingenuity of the young that must be married together to begin to respond in a real and robust way. And so we have to expand who sits at the table and where those voices are. And who are the young voices that have relevance, that connect with people, that are expressing the genuine sentiments of the community?
And that's a very good point, and both you and Eugene make some very valid points. You know, we have to be honest in order to create a level of trust in any relationship. You need honesty and transparency to create trust. And so, as community members, we do need to, like you said, speak up on behalf when we see things that are not indicative of our communities. And you also mentioned about, you know, elevating and amplifying those young voices that can touch and reach some of those young people. Yeah, please. No, you can make as many points as you want. That's the purpose. You know, the solutions here.
Because I don't want us to back away from, and I don't back away from the notion that there are too many guns, legal or illegal, in our community. Okay, and for whatever reason, we encounter at 100 young people with guns, and we do. There is a notion that if I have a gun, I'm safe.
Yeah.
And that's not a proper notion all the time, because if you have a gun and if you are in a mental crisis, that's not safe. If you have a gun and you're angry, that's not safe. If you have a gun and you're inexperienced with it, that's not safe. And so we see young people in our school system, we see young people on our streets who equate safety with a gun. And so we have to change that mindset. Okay, and so, you know, I'm a gun owner, and I had a gun stolen from my car before out of my briefcase. You know, but I don't believe everybody ought not have guns. We need to have the right mechanisms in place for people to have guns, and we have to start with our young people. You know, we give out gun locks when we walk around knocking on doors every one night.
A public service announcement for the gun that was stolen from his car. your weapon should be in a holster, and it should be, your briefcase is not a holster. So we can't, and one of the ways that folks get access to guns is legal gun owners leaving them places where they are accessible.
And I thank you for that, because even
Tony,
though.
can I talk about that too?
Yes, please.
So I was hoping Eugene or somebody on the panel would mention that. And so for me, it also goes back to policy, right? And so I don't know if you guys have seen in other states, they're cracking down so much on people leaving the guns in the cars because it's such a problem that the law-abiding citizen is making provisions for the quote-unquote criminal to be able to get the weapon. And so in terms of safe storage and gun locks and all these other things, I know Hillary Moore has mentioned multiple times with our gun violence steering committee, if we can get to a place this summer of safe storage, talking about that, at the very least you would cut down on half those crimes we're talking about in terms of people getting access to guns. And so I just wanted to lift that up before we moved on.
I really want to, and we've talked about it so much because this violence is being committed, via guns. There's no running from that. And I do want to touch on that, but just really more so because I think there's more that we can dig into in terms of attracting young people. And Pastor Jetson, I think you mentioned it in terms of amplifying those young voices, but also too, I think, not everyone may be a leader, but everyone can serve. And so what can we do in terms to attract those young people who may not be the amplified leader voices, but also to be able to let them know that you can serve. And it's that law of attraction, that attracting their fellow students, their fellow friends, their different people that they may interact with that may be able to grab some of those people that may be prone to committing that violence. What can we do to attract those voices to be in community forums like this and to let their voices be heard?
So we have Sister Key from BR for the People, which is a group of young advocates, right? So I think the first thing we do is before she leaves this room, we all need to stop and ask her why she came, right?
Yeah.
And that would be the first step, really plugging into the folks that are already engaged and say, why are you here? What did you see that got you here? One thing I asked her this morning, I said, hey, are you on the panel? She said, no, but I saw this on Brad Gordon's page. So it might be looking at influencers that have the ability to reach that population, because sometimes I walk in the rooms and the folks that are there don't really know the issue. They don't know what's going on because we're not there, right? And I think sometimes there's an adage of folks that say, well, I'm from this place, I'm from there, I grew up there. I have no angst that I cannot walk down in South Baton Rouge and do some of the things that I did when I was living there, right? That some of those things have changed. We have to go back to these communities and get to the people that are living there, that are walking through it. Those are their experiences, right? We have to talk to those people that have actually walked that route, that have went from being a shooter to being a hustler to now being off the streets. Until we get more of those people in the rooms, we just gonna still be in rooms guessing.
Listen, Eugene, I did that recently, Tony. So after the toddler was killed on North Washington, the 100 went out. Let me tell you one of the encounters, one of the stories we heard. A 70-plus-year-old couple who had been there, retired, down 3 blocks from the 100 office. They looked at me and they said, Mr. Mike, we sleep on the floor every night in our house because of the gunfire. That ought not happen in that person. That ought not happen to somebody's grandmother and grandfather. That they don't have peace in their retirement years in our city, that they have to sleep on the floor because of the gunfire that goes on in our community. And guess what? And they said, listen, they know that you guys are here walking the streets. They've gone away right now, but they'll be back this evening. So we know who they are, and we can't be afraid to engage them. I'm sorry.
I hate to hear that, and we'll talk more about that. Again, this is just creating solutions, and this isn't going to be our only conversation. This is an opportunity for us to be able to actively be part of healing the community so that we can, continue to not have situations like that happen, please.
Let's talk about solutions when it comes to how do we attract the right people, right? One of the things that's extremely obvious is people who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. I'm asked to do things like this very often, and I'm always extremely honest with people. I'm a middle class dude. I grew up in a middle class house, and I create a middle class house for my family, right? I've middle. I've heard gunshots in my neighborhood maybe once or twice, right? One of them was a domestic situation. I am not close enough. Now, I can give you some pointers or some input from an economic development standpoint, and that's where I'm gonna stay, right? Because that's where I can speak with intelligence. We have to deal with people who are on the ground, who are close enough to the problem.
It's a lived experience.
Yes. And then step back and be quiet and listen to them, because they are the ones who need to be leading us into now. They're the ones who need to be leading us into the creation of the policy solutions, but we have to, and Mr. Jetson said this earlier, we gotta step aside and be quiet. And so, I mean, my sister just...
I was about to say, I'm not telling you to step aside and be quiet.
I'm telling myself. I want to hear what this sister has to say.
Eugene spoke about one of our young people being in the audience, who is a part and one of the leaders of one of these organizations. Please introduce yourself and welcome to the panel.
Hi, thank y'all for inviting me to come up here. My name is Keandra Carter. I am the director of BR for the People. We started back in about 2020 with the rise of police brutality. We led a couple protests. We also did a lot of community initiatives. So one of the first things I do want to talk about, we keep saying we need to bring people to the table that know about what this is happening, yet whenever we have opportunities like this, we don't let the people in the audience speak. Why is that? It's a community discussion, yet the community cannot speak to the elected officials that were here. Let's also talk about how when we do have community discussions like this, people like the sheriff can't come. I've never seen the sheriff at one of these discussions. I've never heard his point of view. He's the one making the policies for these police officers that deal with this, and he's not here. And then it's upsetting. Also, let's all take some personal accountability. I'm 20 years old, but I'll admit it, I could have brought somebody. Everybody here, we keep talking about the young people, the young people, the young people. Who brought a young person? We all know people in this age group. We all know people this is affecting every day. And we are not doing our parts to actually reach out and actually listen. We sit here and we sit on a board and we talk about policies and we talk about this and we talk about that. That's not fixing things. We've been doing the same thing for I don't know how long. And it's upsetting. And I believe it's even more upsetting that, when we do have the opportunity for people in the community who are boots on the ground that the elected officials and the selected officials wanted to talk about so much, they couldn't even stay back to listen to what the people who have boots on the ground have to say. I only see 3 people from the previous panel that managed to stay, and I thank y'all, because that means a lot. And also, I will also address this. Whenever we talk about solutions, the first step to solutions is accountability. I only heard the judge mention where her department is lacking. Because let's talk about it. Let's be honest. Let's be open. It's time to have these real conversations. The chief of police for Baton Rouge said all of the people that he is interacting with look the same, dress the same, rap the same, sound the same. But we get mad whenever white people say that about us. We get mad at that, right? We are doing it to each other.
Now, just to clarify, some of the elected officials who did appear, they did have previous commitments that they told us about prior to.
I understand that.
So it's not, I don't want to make it seem as if they didn't care enough to stick around. Some of them did have prior engagements, and some of them actually stayed around a little bit longer than what they initially told us that they could.
I understand that, but I would like to address this. We want to get mad at parents who can't bring their kids to school, parents who, pointing the finger at parents. Those parents have prior engagements to go to work and provide for their kids, because if they don't go to their jobs, their kids are getting taken from them and put into a system that doesn't care about them. So if we're gonna talk about prior engagements, and we're gonna give them leeway, we need to give the people of this city leeway too.
Well, I think that's kind of an apples to oranges discussion, but not to
I
miss
don't think
some
it
of,
is.
well,
It's a job.
not to miss some of the things that you're mentioning. As the leader of one of these organizations that we talked about in terms of being able to attract young people, boots on the ground, things like that, what can these people that are in this audience, because we want to keep things based on solutions, and like you said, we've talked about the problem many times, what can we do in terms of people in this audience, those that are viewing online, those that you may encounter, those that we may encounter, what can we do to help assist organizations like your own and leaders like yourself, young people who are boots on the ground, who are passionate, and who have a love for their community, who want to see change? How can we help assist you?
Okay, well, I will take accountability. When BR for the People started, we started off strong and we did make an impact. We fell back. One of the reasons why we fell back is because we were a group of young people from the city and surrounding areas, and many of us were facing the same issues that we are trying to fight. I am 20 years old. I came from a household of a single mother of 4 children who's working every day to make sure that we have what we need. I'm trying to get myself through college to try to better myself, because my mother wasn't able to go to college. My grandmother didn't even go to high school. So it's hard for people to go out and do these things whenever we're sitting back and we're trying to survive every day. I had to step back because I had to work. Many of the people that were a part of BR for the People had to leave because they had left the state, because there's lack of opportunity and there's lack of connection to people who are actually trying to make efforts. And we need more initiatives getting those people started. We want to know why the young people aren't here. They're surviving. They're trying to survive. The people that really want to help this city, you know what? The people who are close to the problems, they can't come to things like this because they're at work. Or they might just be so mentally drained and tired from having to survive every day that they can't put in extra actions to be productive in their communities the way they want to. It's times that we have conversations like this. What are we doing to make sure that our young people are being given the opportunity?
So the solution that you've seen and that you've experienced as a lived experience is one of a lack of economic resources, both for the organization in order to be a foundation so that you can continue to implement programs, but also a lack of economic resources for those that are involved because they're underemployed and having to work extra jobs. They're emotionally, financially, and physically spent, is what you're saying. So what we have to do right now is to find, not just for yourself, but other organizations like you, to be able to plug you into those resources that maybe Courtney Scott from the mayor's office mentioned about those resources being available, so that not only your organization can be funded and can implement some of these initiatives and ideas and utilize some of the passion that you all have, but also being able to link up with the chamber and some of the other organizations around to try and plug you in, maybe some job training and things like that, so that you all won't be so physically, economically, and emotionally spent, correct?
That is correct. I believe that we need to start having more accessibility. It's great that we have these programs. Most of us don't know about it. I will be honest, most of us do not know about it. I know a lot of people that don't know many of the opportunities that are available to us. Why? Because we have we posted on Instagram, we posted on websites. Do you think a child is going to go and say, what is the mayor's office doing this summer? I hate to say it, but that's the truth. Do you think a child is going to do that? No, because children aren't going to go look for things that they don't even know is possible.
I want to jump in on a couple of points. First of all, I want to say not only to my sister's organization, BR for the People, but currently, Metro Offices is investing $10,000 at least in community change efforts. And so on our website, we are accepting applications for community-based change efforts that we will put a seed of $1,000 in 10. The hope is to identify those that we can further invest in and provide support it challenges our beliefs, our loyalties, our habits, our comfort. And sometimes when that fire starts to get turned up and we feel uncomfortable, sometimes we are too quick to turn the fire down so that we can be comfortable in our conversations. We are not going to get to a real different community and stay comfortable. We're going to be uncomfortable. People are going to say things that don't make us feel comfortable, that make us angry, that step on our toes, that bother us, and we got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and recognize that getting to a better community, getting to this safe, healthy, and hopeful community, change costs sacrifice. And if we aren't ready to make it, ain't gonna happen.
And let me say right now, I think the uncomfortableness and the sacrifice is the other element, you know, the room is big, so we got a lot of elements. Is we have to start with black men. All right? And so we see an uptick in membership in the 100 during times of crisis. That black men want to become part of the 100 because they want to help provide a solution. But we have to also learn as community-based organizations and nonprofits, how do you balance the time of volunteers? Because what my young sister said is so true. When you spend your 24 hours just trying to survive, trying to just go to school, go to work, take care of your kids, take care of your home, take care of yourself, it ain't a whole lot of other time out there to volunteer to save the world. So we have to learn how to recognize I can go and give Tony 2 hours or 3 hours to help improve my neighborhood, to work with Summer of Hope that the mayor is launching this summer. I can go and spend some time in one of the 100 programs. We have a new program, Shane's Club, for 100. We have a new program called Respect for Life. And we're going to roll it out in the school systems this fall in high schools as an elective. And it is we had a movie produced, and Trey is our executive director. We had a movie produced, and we have 5 modules that follow this movie. We follow the life of this 15-year-old kid for 1 week, and then follow his life. We use it as a teaching tool. His first module deals with self-awareness. Who is he? How does he become a young man? The second module deals with everything begins at home. He's raised by a single mom. The third module is education, the way up, the way out. What do you do with a bad teacher? A good teacher. Stresses in school. The fourth module that day that all of us, the 4 of us look like an encounter with law enforcement. How do you get home alive? And that 5th module is learning everything in the criminal justice system. And so that program we've invested several $100,000 in, and it is a game changer, and it is our way of making a difference in the community. And so my Chambers Club, look for Respect for Life. Coming to an organization, you can get it. Contact Darius, Lance Richmond, Darius, school board member, is our new executive director. He's implementing that program. But we have to do the things that Rev talked about. We have to find the time to get engaged, individually and collectively.
And I want to say this before we get too far off the point, and just to kind of come back, and then Kaitlyn will jump in with you because I know you have a comment. And that is for Ms. Carter, will be our for the people. What I would like for everyone in the audience to do, and also for those that are tuned in via our live stream, is to reach out to Ms. Carter and be able to help provide those resources and the things that not just her organization, but other young organizations that are led by people that are like her need. Because it's important for us, and she brought up a very good point, how many of us are actually bringing young people to these things? We all know, there's a situation where at some point we're going to have that uncomfortable conversation, as Pastor Jetson mentioned, about the fact that some of us in our community are harboring criminals. The fact that we have to be honest and be able to say that we are okay in justifying some of these actions, and we are okay with hiding it. We are okay with it. And so, again, this is not our only conversation that we're going to have. This is not the last conversation that we're going to have, but of course one that kind of kicks the ball rolling and kind of gets us to get in a solutions-based mindset. So again, before we get out of here, I want Ms. Carter to provide her information to everyone, and also to be able to be a resource for those that may want to reach out to organizations like the one that she leads. But Kaitlyn, you had something that you wanted to offer.
Yeah, I think the question on the table was how do we get, and Ms. Carter brought that home too, how do we get the right people at the table, or the folks that we're attracting, are they the folks that are quote unquote perpetuating violence or victims of violence? And for me, I think that has a lot to do with relationship building in the community, and getting creative on how we meet people's needs and how we meet them where they're at. And so last year, the Power Coalition, in partnership with Elm Grove and Shiloh and a host of folks sitting in the audience, worked hard to do a 1,500-person listening session where we got creative during COVID. We did Zooms, we did outdoor listening sessions with kids at the libraries, and just really utilized our relationships with churches to be able to find folks that have discrepancies or issues around the criminal justice system, but also are fearful of the gun violence that's escalating in our communities. And of that 1,500-person listening session, everyone said the same thing. They wanted better housing, more equitable jobs and wages, better education for their kids, and then most importantly, doing away with the situation around blight and lack of grocery stores. And all that to say, I think there's this narrative perpetuating in the community that people don't go to church anymore, people don't look to the church anymore. But when you look at some of the deep canvassing we've done with our churches over the course of the last year and a half, we knocked on doors and talked to folks that said, I haven't seen anybody here, and I see you shaking his head, one of our canvassers, I haven't seen anyone in our neighborhood in 10 years. And we were able to use that moment of get out the vote, or vaccine access, or redistricting, talking about certain issues that were relative to the conversation at the time to build that relationship in those communities. So what does it look like now to stand up Shiloh or Elm Grove or some of these other churches that are already doing the work year round to make sure that they address the violence in their communities, making them the infrastructure in the forefront of addressing violence? And so I think that should be one of our solutions that we walk with today. What does it look like? Folks remember Red Bean Monday right after Ida. They remember getting, plenty of stuff from here, just the essentials for their households to be able to meet their needs, the gift cards from Power Coalition, the gift cards from the city, and that is the partnership that we need to work to build in terms of addressing violence in our communities.
And I greatly appreciate that. Just for the sake of time, we do have to conclude this panel, but we will provide an opportunity for those community members that are in person to be able to have breakout sessions at the rear of the facility in terms of being able to continue this conversation going. Again, this is not going to be our final opportunity to reach out and to create an opportunity to provide solutions, not just for the gun violence in the community, but for other things that we may see fit, that we may need to address. I know Kaitlyn mentioned things about redistricting and making sure that every person is represented fairly and that their vote counts in a fair way, and that they can be a part of a district that represents them fully and not one that is politically drawn out for them. Just making sure of those things. That's just one of the many things that we can continue this conversation about, along with continuing the gun violence and the opportunity, the economic disinvestment, the socioeconomic standing, education, all of those different things. So again, we thank you all for giving us your time this wonderful Saturday morning. And like we said, we will continue this conversation with some breakout sessions in the rear of the facility for those community members that are in attendance. Again, I would like to thank Prophetic Voices for providing this platform, and Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church, of course, Pastor Fred Jeff Smith, who's about to make some words, about to greet us with some words at this time.
I just want to thank everyone who took the time to come on both panels. I want to thank members of the community who came to share. 3 hours is a long time. It's a long commitment for anyone, and we're grateful for you making that time commitment. I'm grateful to Mr. King for serving as our facilitator in both panels. What we planned at the end was for breakout sessions for you to have the opportunity to talk with one another about what you heard. At each of those 5 sets of tables to the back, there's a sheet of paper with 2 questions on it. What did you learn, and what work are you willing to do going forward? So if you have the time to remain, for those who are viewing, we're going to shut y'all down, so y'all done. But for those who are present, if you wanted to take the time to share in the breakout sessions to the back, 2 questions. What did you learn, What specifically are you willing to do with what you have learned? And again, thank you so very much for your time and your attention. This was recorded, and Mad Game Entertainment, Terrence Turner, who serves as our audio-video minister for the church, is going to make this available to you. Give us a couple of days to make sure that we have it right, but he'll make it available to you at your leisure. Again, thank you so very much.